Newswatch. Now, when this crisis ends, I'm afraid the ABC is going to come out of it even more powerful than ever. And that's because, being taxpayer funded, it won't lay off a single journalist. In fact, it's frozen layoffs. But its competitors in the media who don't get taxpayer money, rely on advertising, will be devastated. Advertising's collapsed. And some will simply go. In fact, some have already gone. At least 8 country newspapers have been forced shut, including the Sunraysia Daily, the Swan Hill Guardian, the Barry Daily Truth in Broken Hill, the Loddon Times and the Great Southern Star in Gippsland. And big city newspapers like the Herald Sun, the Daily Telegraph have had, well, they're having to cut their payroll. Same here, staff cuts or cuts in costs are having to be made. Channel 7 actually looks in deep strife as a complete organisation. So the ABC will, relative to all of them, come out of this bigger and bloated. 4 national radio stations, 5 TV stations, 54 local radio stations, huge online newspaper. And this is actually a very serious threat to public debate because the ABC is so big and so biased and so prone to groupthink. Take this, its coverage of this crisis. It's prone to alarmism, to telling you only the worst, and to calling for yet more and more big government, shut down this, shut down that, to fix it. Joining me on Newswatch is Gerald Henderson, head of the Sydney Institute, columnist with the Australian newspaper and author of the Media Watchdog blog, out every Friday. Gerald Henderson, thanks for joining me. How much of a worry is the factors I've just put forward?
Well, it's a huge worry. As we all know, the greater diversity in the media, the better, and already country newspapers are closing, as you've pointed out in your list. And obviously, because of the fall in, very graphic fall in advertising, city media, television, radio, newspapers are challenged as well. And meanwhile, the ABC's got $1 billion a year. The ABC has announced that some staff cuts that were planned now won't go ahead. In other words, no one at the ABC will lose their job. And more importantly, the ABC's never been such a conservative-free zone, and it's never been, in my view, it's never been so strongly of a certain disposition, which is essentially either left of centre or leftist. I mean, that's just the truth. And yet we know, in spite of what the ABC says about how it's the most trusted news source in Australia, it's not what Australians watch. I pointed out in my Media Watchdog last Friday, if you look at the free-to-air news, Channel 7's in front, Channel 9's second, the ABC is a distant third, and 10 comes in fourth. Now, that doesn't take in Foxtel, Sky News, for example. We're talking about free-to-air. But Australians don't go to the ABC when they want news about a crisis like the current crisis. They essentially go to commercial television, which is very much threatened. So this is a very serious problem, and there's no willingness of the ABC, from the chair to the managing director to the senior staff, to bring about any increased pluralism within the organisation.
Now, you mentioned the ABC TV, but of course it also has all those radio stations, yes, and it has an online newspaper selling its product for free when the struggling competitors, yes, now, which rely on advertising and sales, have to sell it. Now, one, yes, reason I worry is an example of what I'm talking about, this groupthink. The ABC's been louder than anyone in raising fears about the coronavirus. Now, the, yes, coronavirus is fearful, but it's... Yeah. The ABC has gone right over the top. Its main spokesman, so to speak, on this issue is Wayne Swan, who's been promoted by ABC chairman Ita Buttrose as a treasure, who's risen to the challenge, etc., featured in promotion. Here is Swan on the ABC just last night saying, "We will be in Italy, where more than 11,000 people are said to have died."
As we speak, we are 12 to 20 days behind Italy. So we're going straight up. So if you're going straight up and you're doubling every 3 or 4 or 5 days, it's year 7 maths. We're going to be where Italy was.
In fact, we've seen a dramatic slowing of the rate of increase. And a week and a half ago, Wayne Swan tweeted that we'd actually have 3,400 infections by last Wednesday, nearly 8,000 infected people on the weekend. What did you make of that prediction, Gerard?
Well, it was hopelessly wrong. He said on the 21st of March that by the end of the weekends just past, we'd be between 7,000 and 8,000, and the figures come in around 4,000. Now, if I'd made a prediction like that that was so false, I would at least correct it, But Dr. Swan was on 7:30 last night. He was on ABC TV Breakfast this morning and never corrected it. And what you had on Four Corners last night, which was probably which would have been pre-recorded, so I'm not quite sure when the statement was made, but the senior medical advisors to the Commonwealth Government and to the state governments, and bear in mind Dr. Swan, in spite of what Ida Buttrose says, is not an expert in disease control. The senior advisors are saying that we are not like Italy. But Dr. Swan is going on Four Corners without being challenged by the interviewer and saying that we are like Italy. Now, this is a very serious situation, as we all know, but it's not improved by commentators who are presented by the public broadcaster as experts and in a sense give alternative advice to the real expert advice that's going to the National Cabinet. That is not a satisfactory situation, and in that situation Dr. Swan should be extremely careful that he doesn't get these facts wrong, and on this occasion it's very clear, if you look at the graph, any graph you do on this, that he's hopelessly wrong without a correction.
Look, Gerard, I think this is a time for feeding people the facts, not excess fear. Now, Norman Swan, though, actually also last night said this, Gerard.
I think it's reasonable to draw an analogy here with wartime. Already in Britain, it looks like the Somme, and I'm not overstating it.
This is largely the unchallenged view of the ABC. The analogy here is with the Battle of the Somme in World War I, Gerard.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Swan went on to say that we were going the way of the Battle of the Somme. Now, the Battle of the Somme was the greatest disaster in British military history. It took place on the 1st of July 1916. The British lost 60,000 casualties, many of them on the first day, and 20,000 dead. Now, to compare anything with the Battle of the Somme, it's got to be a massive catastrophe. Now, that may be the case in Australia, but on the current figures with around 20 dead, that is not a reasonable comparison. That is gross fear-mongering unless you are completely ignorant of what the Battle of the Somme was all about. Now, if you are completely ignorant, as Dr. Swan may be, then you shouldn't go on Four Corners and make the comment. If you know what the Battle of the Somme was all about, then you shouldn't get into gross exaggeration and put fear in the population when the advice to the government, and so far I think most people concede that Australia's done relatively well in this crisis, when the advice to the government is not to that effect. But at the ABC, no one will silence Dr. Swan or anyone else, and what you have is Chris Ullman, who was at the ABC once and is now at Channel 9, pointed out recently, you've got this body of people who all praise one another, tell one another how brilliant they are, say they're better than everyone else, and that goes on all the time. And in that kind of environment, like many people, this would go to your head. So Dr. Swan's off the leash, and if he's right, I will accept that he's correct. But if he makes serious errors within a week, he should say that he made an error, or ABC management should make that statement for him. But they haven't done it because no one runs the organisation. It's all run by a clique and nobody runs it.
Well, luckily he was wrong. He thought that he might have coronavirus and went into isolation, but luckily he was wrong about that. And we're grateful that we posted today that he has not got coronavirus. But all the more reason for other voices in media outlets, Gerard, and heaven help the media organisations that are struggling to survive, because this is just terrible. Thank you so much for your time.